Alright, so FPL has been out for a little while now, and I imagine like most players, I've made a few changes to my original team. So here is my latest draft. Okay, just before we get into the team itself, I just wanted to advertise the Golden Goal FPL Mini League. The winner of this Mini League this season will get a Golden Goal mug and a packet of biscuits of your choice. You can see the league code there to join. I'll put a link to it in the description as well. Alright, so just looking goalkeepers and defenders wise then, I've made a video basically talking through who I think the best players are in each position. Goalkeepers wise, I think, well, these are the best players at each price point. I think to start with, I'm probably going to pick a 4.5 million keeper. I've gone for one at the moment, but I'm pretty sort of even between three of them. Dean Henderson of Crystal Palace, Sanchez of Chelsea, and Sells of Nottingham Forest. Nottingham Forest have a fantastic set of opening fixtures, but Sells last season just wasn't quite as good for saves per game as Henderson in Sanchez, which obviously equates to less points. So I'm very much torn on who I prefer from this 4.5 million price category. So I've gone for one of them in my team at the moment, but genuinely, I feel that all three of these guys are genuinely pickable. Next up then, Trent Alexander-Arnold at 7 million, I think is just absolutely phenomenal value. Last season, he only made 25 starts, but he got 3 goals, 5 assists, and 8 clean sheets. That's an incredible set of returns from an attacking perspective for a defender in that amount of games, in addition to 8 clean sheets. And one thing I like about Trent is that he is a player that can get consistent returns through 3 different means. I mean, we all know how good he is from an attacking perspective, right? So you can guarantee a level of goals and assists per season. And also with Liverpool being, a decent team defensively, you can guarantee he's going to keep probably across the season between 10 and 15 clean sheets if he makes, say, 38 starts, for example. I mean, my prediction for him this season, he definitely gets in the double digits of assists, in and around 3 to 5 goals, I would say, 10 to 15 assists, and then 10 clean sheets. And if you add all that up, that's like 25 returns across the season for 7 million. And I think if you picked a midfielder or a forward that got that level of returns, you'd be very happy. So I think that logic should apply to Trent as well. Okay, there's a whole list of 4.5 million defenders that are pickable. And because there's such a good amount of 4.5 million defenders, I think it's almost sort of guaranteed that I'm going to have a number of them in my team. At the moment, I think I have 3. I'm not going to say who they are, I'll reveal them in a second, but all of these guys on my screen, I think, are genuinely pickable options. Aït-Nouri at the bottom, the player I've sort of highlighted on by showing his picture there. I think he's the best in this price category, but Wolves have such a tough opening run of fixtures that it's really hard to go with him from the start. I think Concert is probably the most reliable. He plays, I think, probably for the best team that's on this list in terms of the other assets that are out there. But with the Champions League mixed in for Aston Villa this season, I'd slightly question if he's going to play every game, I suppose. Lewis Dunk, Anderson, Gahey, Richards. I'd say all of these guys are fairly similar. Anderson and Dunk probably has the most attacking upside. I'd say Anderson is probably my favourite of the Crystal Palace 4.5 defenders. Lewis Dunk probably offers a decent amount of attacking threat because he's so dangerous in the box, but Brighton, they only kept 5 clean sheets with him in the team last year. Mikalenko of Everton is, I think, a good balance of a decent level of attacking returns and clean sheets. Martinez of Man United, we didn't really get to see a whole lot of him last season. He only made 8 starts. But I feel like Man United are going to be greatly improved this season. Obviously, the new ownership has already signed a couple of players. They're looking at Ugarte, the centre defensive mid, to come in for Casemiro. Honestly, I think that will completely transform how Man United play and how many goals they concede. So I think he could be on for a decent season. He's obviously not going to light the world up in terms of attacking returns, but I would suggest Man United can keep at least, 10 to 15 clean sheets. I would imagine he could keep more clean sheets than other players on this list, basically. Dan Burn, I think, is probably the outstanding Newcastle 4.5 million defender, but they have signed. They've obviously got Livramento, Lewis Hall, Lloyd Kelly. There's plenty of options, even with the injuries they have, with Botman, for example, for Burn to be left out. So I'd proceed with caution there. Van de Ven of Tottenham, he's going to play every game that he's fit for. But just with his athletic nature, I think he's prone to hamstring injuries, which we saw last season, the reason why he missed 11 games. 3 goals and 5 clean sheets from that is not bad, but he's not very good from an attacking perspective. Only 0.03 expected returns per 90, and I think those 3 goals, I'm not sure he can quite replicate that this season. And only keeping 5 clean sheets in that period of time suggests that Tottenham, well, you all know Tottenham ship a few goals, right? And then you've got Aït-Nouri, who I covered already. So those are my 4.5 million defenders. Based on what I've said, you can probably guess who's going to be in my team. And then we've also got the Arsenal defence. I think for me, it's really hard to ignore them this season with just how reliable they've been over the last couple of years, just how good they were last season defensively. They conceded by far and away the fewest goals of any team in the league and kept 18 clean sheets. Now, Ben White, Raya, Saliba and Gabriel, I think, are probably the most nailed on at the moment. But the problem the Arsenal defence will have, particularly when I guess the Champions League and Cup fixtures kick off, is Calafiori and Timber. You know, both of those guys are, I would suggest, good enough to some way get into the Arsenal starting 11. I think one of them probably plays left back to begin with. Obviously, they got Zinchenko there as well. And then these 3 outfield players, at least White, Saliba and Gabriel, play every game, or at least to start with. And with that level of defensive records and solidity, I think they're worth picking. And finally, I think you need to complement those sort of players that I've spoken about with a 4 million defender. I think it makes sense to go for a 4 million defender because there are plenty that are going to play. You've got Wout Faes, Vestergaard, some Ipswich defenders, etc. that are all likely to play every game. But I think my 2 standouts are Barco of Brighton, who should play left back with Estupiñán being out injured. I think he's better than any of the promoted defenders. And then Ben Johnson, who used to play for West Ham last season. Those are his stats that he put up for them last season. But he signed for Ipswich, and I think he's going to be a regular starting right back for them. I think Tuanzebe was kind of their first choice right back in the Championship last season, but I'd imagine Ben Johnson as an actual out-and-out fullback will come in to replace him. So in terms of 4 million defenders, these 2 are my favourites. So here is how I've lined up defensively so far then. I've got Sanchez in goal at the moment. The Man City at home fixture first up is not great, I'll admit. But after that, the fixtures are nice, and across the season, I think Chelsea are going to improve on what they did last season. And yeah, I think 4.5 million defender for a guy that should start for Chelsea is a good price. Gabriel, Barco and Trent, I don't really need to say any more about those guys because I've already spoken about them. But Gabriel, I would say, is probably my favourite Arsenal defender, just from the fact that he has so much goal threat when he's in the box from set pieces, and it is, you know, considerably, I think, more than Saliba and Ben White carry. So yeah, for that reason, I went for Gabriel. I like the thought of picking Barco to start with from Brighton. And one thing about Barco as well is I just think his price will go up. You know, when people see that he's playing regularly, well, at least at the start of the season when Estupiñán's coming back, if people see that he's regularly starting for Brighton at 4 million, he's going to be bought by a load of players. And I think, you know, if you're watching this video, there's a bit of insider knowledge there at the moment. So I think his price could go up. So not only do I think he's the best 4 million defender, I think he's a good investment as well. Already spoke about Trent. I think he's a fantastic option. He's got Ipswich away first up. What more could you want? Okay, so first midfielder that's going to be in my team is Eberechi Eze. 24 starts last season, 11 goals and 5 assists. But with Elise departing for Bayern Munich, I think Eze is really going to become that Crystal Palace talisman. He's going to take penalties, he's going to take free kicks, he's going to start every game, and he's probably going to play 90 minutes. The only sort of little put off for me, I guess, is that he missed 14 games last season through injury, right? I think he was dealing with a bit of a hamstring issue, which once a player does their hamstring once, it seems to reoccur. So it's just something to bear in mind. But you know, he's obviously going to be that talisman for Crystal Palace. And with the information we've got, and 7 million is his price tag, you can't deny he's going to be a good option. Okay, and Anthony Gordon. I can't ignore Anthony Gordon. 34 starts, 11 goals, 16 assists, 27 attacking returns from those 34 starts. Eddie Howe absolutely loves the guy. He's a great price in my mind at 7.5 million. Even if he just matched the level of returns he got last season, he's worth that price and will really help my team, I think. But I expect him to improve. I don't know if anyone's seen the podcast and interview that he did with Gary Neville, but just hearing how his mentality is and what kind of player he actually is, like under the skin, makes me think he can get even better than what he did last season. And with all that in mind, I mean, I think he's going to be a really good option. And then a little surprise package in Morgan Rogers. He's been in really, really good form in pre-seasons, already bagged a few goals in the games that he's played so far. And he comes into the game at only 5 million. And with Diaby set, well, I think he's pretty much confirmed to be going to Saudi Arabia now. That opens up a spot for Rogers to be a kind of consistent starter for Aston Villa. Emery clearly really, really likes him. And it's, I guess, a headline sort of statement, isn't it? But could he be this season's Cole Palmer? You know, the player that starts as a super, super cheap price tag and then goes on to have a really, really strong season. And last year, you know, his numbers weren't bad. 8 starts and 4 attacking returns from those 8 starts, although he did massively overperform his XG and XA. West Ham, and then Arsenal's obviously a tough one, and Leicester after that, you know, decent set of opening fixtures. And I think at 5 million, as long as we get security or confidence that he's likely to start that first game for Aston Villa and, you know, Emery is confident with him, I think he's going to be a really nice option and he makes my team. So with all that in mind then, I've gone for Gordon, Rodgers, Eze, and then in addition, Mo Salah. I think it's really hard to go without Salah, particularly with the first game week captaincy in mind. I think he's going to be by far and away the most popular captain for game week 1. And with the way the FPL transfers are now working, where you can bank up to 5 free transfers, it means that players that get off to a good start are going to be at a real advantage because they won't need to change their team for a few game weeks. They'll be able to accumulate all these transfers and then not only, you know, stay ahead, but keep their lead and extend it with the transfers that they've got. And particularly at the start of the season this year, I'm really keen to just stick with the pack. I know it sounds really boring, but with Ipswich away being that first fixture, I think Salah is not necessarily going to be the most popular player in the game because I think a lot of people will have to decide whether they want Salah, Haaland or both in their team. But I think he's going to be the most popular captain, which means, you know, if I want to stay with the pack, I think I've got to pick him. On to the forwards then, and I think it's fair to say that most players are going to have 1, maybe 2 players from like the premium forward price category, maybe 3 even. Haaland, Watkins and Isak, I think, are all genuinely pickable, right? I probably wouldn't go near Kai Havertz, but Haaland, Watkins and Isak, definitely. And I think I'm going to have Haaland in my team purely because he's got Ipswich at home in game week 2 and then West Ham away in game week 3. And I think I would want to captain him for both of those game weeks. So yes, he's the most expensive player in FPL history. But as you'll see when I reveal my full team, I can build a team I'm happy with him in it. So ultimately, I can captain in those weeks and have a team I'm happy with, right? And then you get down to Watkins and Isak. I can't have both of them if I have Haaland in my team. So I have to make a decision on which of the 2 that I prefer. And when you look at the stats, Isak scored more goals from 10 less starts than Watkins did last season. He's definitely the confirmed Newcastle penalty taker, whereas with Douglas Luiz departing Aston Villa, there's a chance that Watkins could now be their pen taker. But I also feel like it could be John McGinn as the international penalty taker at Scotland. He takes them for Scotland. So, yeah. Watkins also is not all that good at pens. He missed a fair few, and that's what, you know, enabled Douglas Luiz to take the penalties in the first place. So, yeah, there's that to bear in mind. And also, when you look at the sheer amount of assists that Watkins picked up last year, right? He got 18 assists in the league that last season, or FPL assists. You have to ask the question, is that sustainable? And he did all of that from only 4 expected assists as well. So he wasn't the most creative player, but he's still got 18 assists. So you'd have to question, you know, is that number achievable again? And with all that in mind, I think I prefer Isak to Watkins. And then kind of the secret to picking this team is having a 5.5 million forward in addition to Morgan Rodgers, right? And I think there are 2 that are pickable in the game at the moment. You've got Adam Armstrong of Southampton and João Pedro of Brighton. Now, Brighton, under a new manager, it's not totally clear how they're going to line up, but De Zerbi was just an absolute tinker man, wasn't he? And I don't think the new manager will tinker quite as much as De Zerbi did. And for that reason, I think João Pedro probably starts at least the beginning 3 games, although those first 3 fixtures are not the best. But looking at the numbers he put up, he only scored 9 goals from 12 XG from 19 starts and made a decent amount of assists too. And you can look at those expected returns per 90 there. 0.74 is really, really good. If you look back to any of the players I've spoken about at different price categories, expected returns per 90 per million, I would say João Pedro is the best player in the game based on his stats last season. So just something to bear in mind. Adam Armstrong, we've only got his stats from the Championship because he played in the Championship last season, right? But he started all 46 games, got 21 goals, 13 assists, decent level of returns, very similar in terms of performance to João Pedro in the Premier League last season. I guess the benefit of Armstrong over Pedro is that you can just guarantee he's going to play every game, and he's the penalty taker, which I guess João Pedro is too for Brighton, right? Maybe that will change under the new manager, not totally sure. So João Pedro probably gives you more chance of getting returns, But Adam Armstrong is just completely nailed on to play every game. He played all 46 games in the Championship last season, which is really rare for a striker to do. There aren't really any other strikers in the Championship that would have done that. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on those two players. So here we are then. Here's the full team. Haaland, Isak and João Pedro up front. I think, like I said, I prefer Isak to Watkins. I like Haaland for the game week 2 and 3 captaincy. And I just can't pick Adam Armstrong to start with. You know, if João Pedro gets left out in a few games, etc., might bring Adam Armstrong in at that point. And on the bench, a 4 million goalkeeper, 2 4.5 defenders and a 4.5 million midfielder is kind of the structure that I'm going with, particularly with Barco, the 4 million defender starting. I can't find a 4 million goalkeeper I can hang my hat on playing, so ultimately pick whoever you think will be good at that price category. I went for Dan Bentley because he played a few games last season and he was actually really, really good, to the point where I would have thought he could have actually displaced Jose Sarr as the first choice Wolves keeper. Maybe that's something that could happen this season. I think he's the 4 million goalkeeper with the best chance of actually getting some game time. I went for Martinez and Konsa. I just think probably the two other best 4.5 million defenders when you consider the opening fixtures. I think Aït-Nouri will find his place in my team at some point, but with the opening fixtures that Wolves have, I just can't quite pick him. Then Harry Winks, I think, is the best 4.5 million defender in the game. He played 43 games for Leicester last season. He's the most attacking of sort of the 4.5 million midfielder options, even though he's a bit more of a defensive midfielder. I think he's going to play every game. He's probably the best option at that price point. Okay, and to end the video then, I'm looking at the Fantasy Football Hub AI team selector tool to give me a team rating and a projected points total for game week 1. I am now an affiliate of Fantasy Football Hub. There's a link in the description to sign up for yourself. You can put your own team into the AI team rating tool and get a rating for yourself and a projected points figure as well. What it also does is once you put your team in, you can also upload your team, by the way. If you take a screenshot on your PC or your phone of your team and upload it to the AI tool, it will automatically populate the team for you based on, you know, the text, etc. in the image, which is really useful. It means you don't have to manually pick the team a second time round. It's a really good feature, really useful to see, you know, the projected points for the next few weeks. It suggested one change for my team, and like I said, I'm pretty flexible around who I pick in goal out of Sanchez, Henderson and Sells. It suggested I go for Henderson in goal for expected points. It's actually suggested I start Konsa over Barco, Gabriel, Alexander-Arnold in defence. I mean, the rest of the team is as you see there. And I would imagine, based on his pre-season's performance, those expected points data for Rodgers will only go up. Yeah, a 91% team rating, 63.4 expected points. I'm pretty happy with that. Check out, again, my link for Fantasy Football Hub. 50% off to sign up, and you can put your own team in this AI tool yourself. All right, and that's the end of the video. That was a lot to go through there, but I know I dragged it out a little bit in terms of talking about all the players in my team in a bit of detail, but I don't think, whatever happens with my FPL team at the start of the season now, I'll make 1 or 2 changes, but I think it's really important to talk through all that because that's really the logic that I'm going to carry with me throughout pre-season until the start with kind of the team structure and players that I pick. Ultimately, unless there's any major injuries or changes, etc., players getting sold, I don't think my starting 11 on game week 1 will be too much different to that, so that's why I thought it'd be useful to give you the explanation there. If you enjoyed the video and found it useful, please leave me a like rating. Let me know in the comments if there are any changes you would make to this team. You can subscribe to the Golden Goal channel, which should be just there on your screen. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video.